Natural law theory also claims that nature is prescriptive. So you should remember from the first week of class that prescriptive refers to um, the concept of ought, essentially, right? Um, to talk about a prescriptive case is to talk about how you ought to act in a particular case, what ought to be the case, rather than what is descriptively the case. Prescriptivity is concerned with what ought to be. And so, according to natural law theory, nature sets the standard for how we ought to act. That's what we mean when we say nature is prescriptive. Nature sets the standard for how human beings, as well as other things in nature, ought to behave or ought to act, or the kind of person or the kind of thing one ought to be. And so, for instance, we might say that one of the natural purposes of a dog is to obey its master. And so when a dog does not obey its master, when it's disobedient or bites the hand that feeds him, um, we would say that's a bad dog. And according to natural law theory, we say that's a bad dog because the dog is not fulfilling its natural purpose. Moreover, according to natural law theory, when things fulfill their natural purposes, the world is functioning in an ideal way. In other words, if everything in nature was fulfilling its purposes in the way that it ought to, whether it's dogs, teeth, or human beings, if everything in nature was fulfilling its natural purposes, then we would live in a perfect world. Nature would be perfect if everything was able to fulfill its natural purposes. So that's another reason why we say nature sets the standard for how we ought to act. Because if we acted that way, we would live a better life. The world would be a better place. We, as human beings, would be able to flourish in a way that we're not able to if we do not fulfill our natural purposes.